women have constituted a very important part of the freedom struggle against the British colonizers. Now, they organized very important protests and demonstrations against the oppressive colonial rule. And it will be very wrong to assume that the Indian national movements were all about men, because women constituted a very important force in the freedom struggle or this nationalistic movement. We learnt about Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi and how she gave a very tough fight against the Britishers during the implementation of doctrine of lapse. Now, in this lesson, we will be focusing on many women's contribution to the freedom struggle. We will be focusing on how these women went out of the familiar space of the household to go on the streets and claim for independence from British colonial rule. So, let us now begin this discussion about women in the freedom struggle. Now, do you think that all women from very beginning were a part of this freedom struggle? It wasn't very easy for women to be a part of this nationalistic movement simply because women have always been relegated to the private sphere of the household. But over time, with the revolutionaries gaining power, women also started joining the national movement. Now, during this time, women from diverse background and all sections of the society participated in the national movement. Now, when we talk about women from diverse background, we have to remember that in the rural spaces, it were mostly the women of lower castes who participated in the national movement, because in the rural spaces, women of upper castes were living quite constrictive lives. But in the urban spaces, women from all the sections, be that from the lower caste or the upper caste, actively participated in the national movement, and they played a very crucial role in helping us gain independence. Now, the participation of women was not just significant for the national movement, it was significant for themselves as well. How was it so? Firstly, women constituted about 50% of the Indian population, and prior to women's participation, only 50% of the population, that is to say, only the men were a part of the national movement. But with women joining hands with men in their fight against the colonizers, the national movement now gained impetus and importance. So, the colonizers also realized that women became a force to reckon with, and the Indian nationalists also found their powers boosted with the participation of the women of India in the national movement. And at the same time, this participation of women contributed to their own upliftment as well, because they were now moving out of the familiar space of the household, so they were no longer restricted to the private sphere. They were coming out on the streets, they were claiming for their own rights as well as for the nation's independence from colonial rule. So, this was significant on two terms. Firstly, it boosted the national movement, and at the same time, it also contributed to their own upliftment. It also contributed to them gaining recognition in the public sphere and politics. Now, when we take into consideration the participation of women in the Indian national movement, let us now look at certain accounts of women and how their responses were to this active participation in the social sphere. Let us now talk about Ambabai. Ambabai was a widow woman from the present day Indian state of Karnataka. Now, Ambabai was married at 12 years of age, and few years later, when she reached 16 years of age, she was widowed. After this, she joined the cause of the Indian national movement. Now, her accounts illustrate what their participation meant for women. because women were now finding themselves gaining importance in the social sphere. Let us now briefly talk about the contribution that Ambabai has had in the Indian national movement. But before proceeding with this lesson, let me ask you a question. To which present-day Indian state did the woman freedom fighter Ambabai belong? Did she belong to Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala or Odisha? Well, the correct answer is Karnataka. She belonged to the present-day Indian state of Karnataka. So let us now learn about the contributions of Ambabai. Now, Ambabai picketed foreign cloth and liquor shops in Udupi. Now, Udupi is a place that is located in the present day Indian state of Karnataka, and here she picketed foreign cloth and liquor shops. So, can you understand how courageous this woman was? At a tender age of 16, she was widowed, following which she joined the national movement against the British colonizers. Now, she was immediately imprisoned for this, and she was later released, but she was again arrested. And while she was briefly released, Ambabai made many speeches. Now, these speeches were supposed to encourage Indian women to join the revolutionaries, to join the cause of the Indian national movement. And at the same time, she also taught spinning. Why did she do so? By teaching spinning to Indian women, she wanted to make them financially independent, because earlier on women have always been financially dependent on their fathers or their husbands for their sustenance, but now they were gaining their voices, they were gaining their rights, and she taught them how to spin. She also organized many Prabhat fairies. Now, Prabhat fairies were very early morning processions, and in these processions, these women gathered in order to discuss and organize the course of actions of the day. So, these were her contributions to the Indian national movement, and she did all this at a very tender age. She braved against the oppressive colonial rule, and while she was doing this, that is to say, while she was participating in the Indian national movement, she described those days as the happiest days of her life. So, this Indian national movement and participation in the same gave women the space to know themselves, and it also gave women the option to gain recognition in the public sphere. Now, do you think it was very easy for these women to join the national movement? Well, it wouldn't have been possible if the social reformers were not dedicating their lives to question women's role in the society. Now, throughout the 19th century, these social reformers dedicated themselves to remove various evil practices from the society. Now, evil practices like widow immolation, sati, child marriage have been prevalent in the Indian subcontinent for many centuries, and these social reformers like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Jyotirao Phule as well as Ram Mohan Roy played a very important and crucial role in fighting and combating these social evils. And while they did so, they were actually giving women the space and recognition that they deserved in the society. So, in this way, by gaining recognition in the society, these women were now able to move out on the streets and join the national movement. But it hasn't been very easy for these women because they had to actually fight for their rights. They were not initially allowed to participate in the national movement, but they had to wage very difficult fights against the Indian nationalists themselves so as to join the Indian national movement and fight together against the colonizers. Now, women's participation had not reached a mass scale before the Salt Satyagraha or the civil disobedience movement of the 1930s. It was only during the salt satyagraha in the early 1930s that women took part actively in the national movement. So earlier on, women were joining the national movement, but that was very local in nature. But now women, with the salt satyagraha and the civil disobedience movement of the 1930s, they now joined actively the Indian national movement. They were spearheading many revolutions as well as protests and demonstrations, and all these were done to bring us the freedom that we enjoy today. In fact, Gandhiji himself was not very willing to allow women join the national movement. But it was Sarojini Naidu who had to persuade Gandhiji to allow women to join the civil disobedience movement. Now, the civil disobedience movement of the 1930s for the first time witnessed mass participation of women in the national movement. And Sarojini Naidu was by then already an established politician. In fact, she had become the first woman president of the Indian National Congress in the year 1925. And she had to persuade Gandhiji to allow women to join the national movement. Here you can see an image of Sarojini Naidu with Mahatma Gandhi. This was taken in Paris in the year 1931 when they had been there to attend the Round Table Conference. So this now brings us to an end of our discussion on women in the freedom struggle. There have been many women who have played a very crucial role in bringing us freedom. Many of their names have survived in the annals of history and many haven't. Well, here we have a list of certain women who played a very crucial role in the national movement. Kasturba Gandhi was the better half of Mahatma Gandhi. She joined many movements which were launched by Mahatma Gandhi. And when Mahatma Gandhi was in prison, she also used to lead these movements. We have already talked about Ambabai, who was a freedom fighter from the present-day Indian state of Karnataka. We have also talked about the renowned woman politician that Sarojini Naidu was. Sarojini Naidu became the first woman president of the Indian National Congress in the year 1925, and she even attended the Round Table Conference in Paris with Mahatma Gandhi. Then we have Sucheta Kripalini. Sucheta Kripalini was another very important woman freedom fighter who worked actively with Mahatma Gandhi. She spearheaded many movements and demonstrations, and then she went on to becoming the first woman chief minister of the present-day Indian state of Uttar Pradesh. Then we have Kalpana Datta. Now, Kalpana Datta worked very closely with Master Surya Sen, and she also played a very active role under the leadership of Surya Sen in the 1930 Chittagong Armory raid. And along with her also worked Pritilata Wadedar. Pritilata Wadedar also actively participated in many movements and demonstrations that were spearheaded and led by Master Surya Sen. And then we have Matangini Hazra. Now, Matangini Hazra hailed from the small town of Midnapur in the present-day Indian state of West Bengal. She led an active movement where she was actually spearheading a whole procession of 6,000 supporters, and then she stormed at a police station. But unfortunately, she was shot by the British officials. Here we see the names of only certain Indian women who played a very crucial and pivotal role in the national movement. They have been instrumental in gathering many processions, and at the same time they boosted the national movement with their participation. Without them, we would have never achieved the freedom that we have today. Without them, India wouldn't have been independent from the colonial rule. But when it comes to the writing of histories, women almost always do not gain as much importance as men. That is to say, women are often sidelined, but it is imperative on our part as students of history to recognize and acknowledge the great contributions of these women to the Indian freedom struggle. So with this, we close our discussion on women in the Indian freedom struggle. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.